Well, Big Pharma has learned how to game the system, getting FDA approval for dangerous, even deadly drugs, and profiting hundreds of millions of dollars. The question, where is the accountability? This story surrounds a woman by the name of Peggy Ryan. She was a rising star in the pharmaceutical sales world, and she worked for a massive company called Endo Pharmaceuticals. In 2002, she was pushed to sell a pain patch that was sold under the name Lidoderm.
Ever since I began in April of 2002, there was much pressure to promote the Lidoderm patch off-label.
So she had access to a lot of information, and she provided that to the government. But then they asked her to wear a wire and obtain audio tapes of the people that she reported to, telling her and other employees to essentially break the law.
We hit an all-time high with Lidoderm at over 54,500 scripts.
Expand that market base for Lidoderm.
Lidoderm at an all-time high number of total prescriptions.
Part of the master scheme is that the Lidoderm patch is covered under orphan status.
But to truly understand this story, you have to understand the system by which Congress is subsidizing something called orphan drugs. See, when a drug is needed for a condition or a disease that affects only a small percentage of the population, the FDA will subsidize the creation of that drug. The idea is that the pharmaceutical companies can't really make a profit on this drug because too few people use it. So we, the taxpayers, wind up paying the drug companies to create the drug. These are called orphan drugs. In this case, Endo Pharmaceuticals created the pain patch Lidoderm. The pain patch was only approved to treat symptoms of post-herpetic neuralgia, a rare disease which is a complication of shingles. But Endo began selling that drug off-label, meaning selling Lidoderm for everything from low back pain to carpal tunnel syndrome to neuralgia. But once a drug is approved, the FDA isn't monitoring the drug for side effects. In the end, Endo Pharmaceuticals agreed to a settlement of $193 million, a massive sum. And yet not really when you consider this stunning fact. During the time that Lidoderm was sold off-label, Endo Pharmaceuticals made $1 billion on that drug. So in the end, even with a nearly $200 million settlement, Endo still made over $800 million.
We did a study that showed that this medication affects brain function.
Doug Brimner is an author, doctor, and professor at Atlanta's Emory University. Years ago, he began studying the acne drug Accutane.
Teenagers taking an acne medicine called Accutane
Right.
were committing suicide.
Right.
And so how did you end up becoming an expert witness? My understanding is a parent of a child contacted you and asked you to look into this. Is that right?
Well, right. I was doing research on depression in the brain, so I was working in a similar area. So the question is whether the same kind of changes that we see in the brain in depression would be seen in kids taking this medication.
Yeah.
So the idea was that if the same brain areas are affected, then that could explain why some teenagers were developing depression and even some of them killing themselves.
Turns out it was. How bad was Accutane? From 1982 to May of 2000, the FDA received hundreds of reports linking Accutane to depression, including 37 suicides, 110 hospitalizations for depression or suicidal behavior, and 284 cases of non-hospitalized depression. The drug was recalled in 11 countries. 7,000 plus lawsuits were filed against the drug maker Roche, and while some claimants received millions for damages and medical expenses, the numbers do not compare to the company's revenue from selling that deadly drug.
So in terms of like the FDA and many of these organizations that are supposed to oversee these pharmaceutical companies and these drug makers, were they failing in their role to be able to determine whether or not these drugs were dangerous?
Well, in all fairness to the FDA, they have a budget to approve drugs, and there's a lot of political pressure for them to approve as many medications as possible and as quickly as possible. But they're not giving a budget to do surveillance or to follow medication safety after the drug is out on the market.
And that's exactly what happened with Accutane. A drug that was supposed to cure acne had severe and even deadly side effects, and yet it remained on the market.
In fact, there were thousands of kids born with severe neurological birth defects. And then the issue with the suicide and depression, that You know, that took several more thousand people before that became clear as well.
Now, here's the most insane part about Accutane, because even though the drug was proven to be deadly, the FDA never shut it down. Not only that, they never declared the drug deadly. And now a generic version of Accutane is about to hit the market. So what you need to know is that in order to go to market, any drug in America must receive the FDA's approval. It's a long and, quite candidly, expensive process. But when the FDA studies only cherry-picked information, has agents who are promised future jobs with big pharmaceutical companies, and doesn't deal with a drug after it's been approved, even when that drug is causing birth defects, even death, then quite candidly, what good is the FDA in the first place? Allowing Big Pharma to control perceptions, outcomes, research, media, even responsibility when something goes wrong? No, Big Pharma does not game the system. Big Pharma owns the system. And it's time that the public demands that that is no longer the case.